This is Lab Medicine Rounds, a curated podcast for physicians, laboratory professionals, and students. I'm your host, Justin Kreuter, a transfusion medicine pathologist and assistant professor of laboratory medicine and pathology at Mayo Clinic. Today, we're rounding with Dr. Jennifer Boland, professor of laboratory medicine and pathology, on how to build your ideal rank list. For joining us today, Dr. Boland.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
So I know this is going to be a hot topic for maybe our student listeners to this podcast, maybe a little bit of a trip down memory lane for the clinicians and laboratory professionals perhaps that have seen kind of match day and the like go on about. Um, do you want to kind of give maybe our audience a little bit of a background on what rank lists are, just to kind of level set everybody?
Sure. The process of matching medical students when they're applying to residency programs is a complicated process, and it's not like when you apply to medical school where you apply to a bunch of different programs and then get an offer or get offers, and then you decide kind of which offer you're going to accept when there's wait lists and things. Instead, what we use is a match. Basically, what a match is a computer system is behind the scenes trying to match each candidate with the program that they're going to eventually do their residency at. So the way this works is interested medical students, they decide on their specialty, and then they start shopping around for residency programs, doing their research and trying to decide what residency programs they might want to apply to. And then they fill out their applications for these programs. May be invited to interview at these programs. And then all of the programs that they interview at, they are asked to rank in their rank list. So essentially, each applicant lists all the programs that they are interested in matching at and ranks them from one to however many they interviewed at. And they're not required to list a program either. So if they interviewed somewhere and they weren't really feeling like it was a good match for them, they don't have to list that program at all on their match list, in which case they will not match there. And on the flip side, the programs are doing the same thing. So the programs are interviewing all these different interested medical students for their positions. And then they create a rank list on their side and rank all of the different applicants that they interviewed. And essentially, then the computer does the magic behind the scenes and tries to match, goes through an algorithm and matches up interested applicants with their programs. And I guess I never really thought that much about it when I was a medical student. It was just like, this is what we're doing. This is a match. This is why it happens. And now I'm a fellowship program director, and our fellowship actually doesn't have a match. But for the last few years, we've been using what we have been calling a common timeline. So, you interview all of your applicants during a certain period, and then you can start offering all of your positions on a certain day, and everybody can consider those offers for a certain amount of time, and then you can move on and offer to the next applicants if you have applicants declining. And now I totally get why the match works, because essentially what we're trying to do is like a manual match, and it's an incredible amount of work to keep track of, which app, where you are in your rank list, what offers you have out, how long those offers have been held, and those sorts of things. It's a lot of work to do when you try to do it manually. So I totally get why the match is the way to go.
Wow. I'm glad you kind of said that. And honestly, I am super jealous because in transfusion medicine, we do not have even a converged timeline.
Yeah.
Um, so for our listeners, this is maybe where I want to get maybe a little bit ask a vulnerable question to you. But so if you can kind of pull yourself back in time to when you were making your original rank list applying for residency, how were you thinking about that, and kind of what were the things that you were kind of considering, and how are you generally weighting things? And of course, our listeners, this is kind of an N of one, how Dr. Boland went about it. But if you could kind of just share maybe what that time was like for you.
Yeah. There's a lot of things obviously that go into each individual's decision making when they're making a rank list. And those things can vary from, the strength of the program, the different attributes that the programs have to offer, where they're located geographically and where you want to be. family circumstances, which sometimes play into those geographic desires. So it's can be a lot to consider, I think. So I actually did a couples match because my husband's a radiologist, so we had a little bit of a multiple layers of complexity there because we were considering a couples match. It wasn't just me matching; it was both of us matching together. So we are essentially linked. So we had to find programs that we were both interested in and areas that we were both interested in. And for us, we decided that we thought we wanted to come back to the upper Midwest. That was one of the things we really were interested in. And the other thing that played into our decision making is at the time we were at medical school at WashU in St. Louis, and they have great programs for both radiology and pathology. So we were pretty happy with what they had to offer there. So we would have been probably pretty happy had we ended up staying there and matching there in our programs. We knew the faculty there and were happy. So we were kind of looking for programs that would either offer something different or potentially get us back into the geographic area that we were most interested in. So those were kind of the factors that we really thought about. So we ended up basically interviewing at all the programs in Wisconsin and Minnesota and not much else because we figured we felt pretty safe based on the conversations we had with our home programs at WashU and we're kind of interested though in perhaps coming back a little bit closer to family. So those were the kind of things that played in. We interviewed at all of those places and then ended up making our list based on a lot of co-decision making and what worked for both of us.
I'm curious. I wonder if you could kind of elaborate a little bit for the listeners. You mentioned kind of the strength of the program and also attributes, and I'm just kind of curious for, you know, uh, how you kind of came about kind of assessing that information. Was there certain questions that you were made sure that you were asking during interviews? Were there certain things that you were kind of able to pull on, like, online or other kinds of resources? Or was this kind of talking with mentors at your program as far as the strength? I'm just trying to get an idea for maybe the listeners of how to go about some of these kind of more nebulous aspects.
Yeah. So I think there is a lot of good information these days about the programs that they share on their websites that you can look at and kind of glean at least some important curriculum information, like how they structure their curriculum. For me, I was applying to anatomic and clinical pathology. So the way that those are integrated together versus separated out into more large chunks of time was a little bit different. And, depending on what was more appealing, whether it was more appealing to you to do some anatomic pathology and then do all of your clinical pathology in one chunk, or do it in several chunks spread throughout your AP, or have them completely intermixed. Those were different when you looked at different programs. The way that they structured those sorts of rotations were different. Um, the way that people structure their both their clinical and anatomic pathology training can be a little bit different. I mean, I think everybody wants you to have the same skills at the end, but there are many different avenues to get there. And hopefully all roads lead to Rome. But what appeals to you, how you learn, how much, subspecialty training you wanted to do in individual types of subspecialty anatomic pathology versus more general surgical pathology, for example. Those sorts of things are variable among different programs, and how clinical pathology rotations are scheduled and assessed, how they
Mm.
teach you those things and how they assess you on those that learning that material is variable. So I think a lot of that stuff can be gleaned by looking at the web page. They usually talk about their curriculum and their structure of their curriculum. Of course, these things can change. So always good if there are particular things that are really important to you personally, that you discuss those with what during your interview to make sure that you have the most up to date information. Um, Advice from mentors and pathologists is always good. However, I think sometimes it's somebody's opinion, so you always have to take those sorts of things with a grain of salt, unless somebody's trained at a program or spent significant amount of time there. Um, how much do they really know? Maybe some of it's hearsay. So you just want to again um, see for yourself, ask your own questions, do your own research, and I think talk to the program leadership and the trainees in the program. So I think that's where the interview portion really comes in huge. Talking to the actual trainees that are in the program, what they see as the strengths of the program, any shortcomings they see in the program, and then again with the faculty members, talking through anything that's particularly important or meaningful to you, or things you don't understand. Talking through those so that you hopefully have a really good feel for what the program is like, what the place is like, how trainees are are feeling about their own program. I think those are really important things to glean when you're in your interview.
Thanks for elaborating on that. Now, here's, I guess, maybe I'm curious how this next question goes. Is how would full professor Dr. Boland today, if you had it to do over again and approach, how would you do it differently this time?
Yeah, I think overall in general, as I look back on my early career in medicine, I perhaps wish that I had taken a bit more of a stretch, more of a reach, applied to more of those reach programs. Tried some, went out to the coast and interviewed at a few programs just to really see kind of what they were about. I mean, I don't know. In retrospect, I don't think we would have done anything differently, but I think it would have been a good experience. Of course, there are things that come into play there that in retrospect, I think I tend to forget, like, when you have to travel to all of these interviews, that comes with some time burden, financial burden, all of these other things, and it just, you get tired, after a lot of interviews. So this is easy for me to say in retrospect, but I do think it might have been just to not sell myself short and maybe have expanded my search a little bit wider when I was looking at programs, because you never know, you might try something and go somewhere for an interview and absolutely love it. So I think it's always a great idea to give programs a chance if you think that they have unique characteristics or something else that you might find particularly interesting. So I guess, easy to say in retrospect. I don't know how practical it was at the time, but maybe I wish I had looked a little broader.
Maybe if I'm hearing you right, I also hear an element of networking that goes into the interview process.
Yeah, I
Is
mean, I think, networking is, I don't know, it's become easier over time, but I thought when I was young and first coming into to pathology and I didn't know anybody at all. So, um, I think, and it feels hard and it feels difficult and it feels a little scary, I think, at that time, at least it did for me, to try to establish a network of pathologists and kind of build my community and work my way into the community and network. It was hard. It was a little scary. So, but I think that when you go out to interview places, again, you meet a whole bunch of residents who are going to be essentially contemporary with you when you're a practicing pathologist someday. And those people are going to end up all over the country. They're going to end up um, all different specialties of pathology. And it starts there, and it starts with meeting program directors, meeting different faculty members. People do tend to remember you once you meet them and they see your face and you have conversations about your life. It starts small, but it's definitely uh, helpful, I think, to meet people and just have a even a brief conversation with them and get to know them a little bit. I think it starts to open the door for a more ease of getting your network built once you're actually in your specialty.
Right on. So I guess that's a plug for the student listeners to think about that. You're gonna match somewhere, and the next time when you guys are going to the USCAP meeting or something like that, don't be shy. And if you had a nice interview with somebody, walk up and introduce yourself again.
Yeah, say hi.
So I'm curious about like kind of the touching to faculty, because the reason why this kind of came up as a podcast for us is a lot of times I've got students coming in and asking me about how they think I should do their rank list. And obviously I feel like it's their rank list, and so I try to provide helpful information that I can. And I think largely I'm asking like reflective
Yeah.
questions. But uh, do you have any do you kind of recommend a couple of colleagues look at it too, or like are you looking at then kind of asking them, or kind of saying, oh, you should also ping so and so, or and does that vary by what their interests are?
Yeah, I think rank lists are very personal, very personal decisions. And no other person can really understand all of the factors that you're weighing yourself, and answer the questions as to like what is most important to you in your program, in your location, and all of these competing priorities. Nobody can answer that for you, so it is a real personal decision, and sometimes it does take some, you know, time to think and settle on, what factors are really the most important to me when I'm making this list. And I think that's something that each candidate needs to really decide for themselves. However, it never hurts to get input from, impartial reviewers, if you will, and to run it by a few people. I think people that you have an established kind of mentorship relationship with are always great people to kind of run this by. And yes, they may have suggestions about, oh, this person is really familiar with this program, or they trained there, or they know, they have a lot of contacts there. Just go talk to them, see what they think. As you're finalizing your decision. But at the same time, it's your rank list. It's your personal decision, and so I think asking for advice is great, but kind of going with your gut to some degree and what you really feel is the most important to you is also going to be what's going to solidify things in the end.
Awesome. A lot of very kind of empowering words of wisdom coming from you. Maybe if we can kind of close out the conversation, the podcast today, and kind of, what are the recommendations you just want to kind of put forward and highlight for the listeners, those that are applying to training programs right now? We're going to be posting this soon, and then obviously in subsequent years, people will be able to find this on online. What are some recommendations you want to just highlight?
Yeah, so I think do your research, and when you're doing your research, I think that's a great time to really think big. Don't limit yourself unless you actually have decided that it's very important for me to be in this geographical area. And maybe even if you have, you know, it costs you time, but it doesn't cost you, any money to travel to an interview, to check out the website, look at the cool features that might really speak to you that different programs have to offer. So I do think that first step of doing your research and really trying to be thoughtful about what programs you want to apply to, and thinking about why you want to apply to those programs is really helpful. And I don't think there's any substitute for putting that kind of time and thought and work in upfront. But don't sell yourself short again. So if you think, well, that program's just, it's out of reach for me, well, how do you know? So, read about it, think about it. It doesn't ever hurt to apply, and give those programs a chance to, actually evaluate you, and you may end up with a match made in heaven. Who knows? So I think that pre-work is really important, in setting the stage for your pre-interview kind of work and research is really important. Um, and then, yeah, your interviews, great for networking. Really pay attention to, how the trainees feel about their program, how the faculty see the program. Let them tell you about the strengths and weaknesses of the program as they see it, because I think a lot of helpful information can come from that. And then when it's time to make your list, really do do some introspection, and think about what factors are really going to be most important to you, whether they be geographical, family, and program factors, and decide how those are all going to play out into your rank list, and then wait for match day.
We've been rounding with Dr. Jennifer Boland, talking about creating your ideal rank list. Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Boland.
Thank you for having me.
To all of our listeners, thank you for joining us today. We invite you to share your thoughts and suggestions via email to mcleducation@mayo.edu. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe. And until our next rounds together, we encourage you to continue to connect lab medicine and the clinical practice through educational conversations.